talking about a few news stories that were interesting. As you know, a bunch of people's houses burned down in Los Angeles, and they're having to move, and so landlords are jacking up their rent. Apparently, there's a California law that you can't raise prices more than 10% in a year, but people are doing things like doubling them. So, sort of discouraging, but not too surprising. So, I've heard a lot of people tell me they got the flu, like 5 people this week, and they said it's really bad. They spent a whole week in bed and everything else. And the Washington Post has an article explaining why. What happened is there was a bigger summer surge of COVID than usual. So now in the winter, a larger number of people have COVID immunity, so the flu is the big risk. So, all right. Also, they say more people are getting vaccinated, especially seniors, which I'm glad to hear. I certainly am all for the vaccine, especially for old people. I recommend it. So the Trump executive orders have been all over the news, many things, and they fired the independent watchdogs at government agencies, among many other strange things. So basically, this is Project 2025. They did announce it in advance. Trump lied and said he didn't know anything about it and wouldn't do it, and now he's doing exactly what it says. So that's what I think all of us actually expected. And so Musk is considering using the blockchain as a government efficiency expert. As you know, he's got this thing called Doge, which is supposedly about government efficiency, although, like a lot of Trump's promises, like remember, Trump promised to end the war in Ukraine before he took office. You might have noticed that didn't happen. He promised to lower the price of groceries, which is essentially impossible. The president does not have that power, and he recently sort of admitted he can't do that. And Musk was going to cut $2 trillion out of the budget, then $1 trillion. Now it's not clear he's going to cut anything at all. What he's probably really going to do is just steer more of the budget to him. Anyway, so he's considering putting the U.S. Financial government expenditures on the blockchain. Might be a way to increase transparency and such, which might have some truth to it, although almost everybody that's used the blockchain has quickly discovered that it's not really worth using. Just ordinary databases seem to solve the job much more efficiently. So if you subscribe to Microsoft 365, a cloud service, they're charging you something for Copilot. And a lot of people are fed up with Copilot, which is Microsoft's assistant, and they think it's not worth it. And there's a way to turn it off and get the old version without Copilot and save $30 on your annual. It takes your annual cost from $100 down to $70, something like that. So that is something some people might do. It's possible Copilot will be useful. You know, like everybody's investing heavily in AI with an incredible belief that it's going to be extremely useful to us soon. But so far, the actual products that have come out are just not that impressive. Let me just check in the Twitch to see if there are comments, and there are none. All right. So I know this used to happen in America a lot, that people that just gave anybody trouble at all, like wives that said they were unhappy being a wife, would be given psychiatric drugs. Apparently in China, they do it if you have anti-government views. This guy protested the government COVID lockdown and then other things, and when you do that in China, apparently they arrest you and give you antipsychotic medication. So he eventually fled the nation. So this is one of the classic repressive regime authoritarian things to do, is that anybody that would dare to question the government must be insane. And in many other nations, it's straight up illegal to criticize the government, like Thailand. And I think essentially China. In both these nations, it's a crime to criticize the government. Here, it has not been so far, although Donald Trump has made it very clear that he wants to make it a crime to criticize the government, although he's currently going through the civil action instead of criminal action by suing news agencies that publish any articles he doesn't like. But they would like to also investigate and prosecute the January 6 investigators. And if Kash Patel gets in as head of the FBI, which is likely, then his number one agenda is a list of something like 50 or 100 known enemies of Trump that he wants to prosecute. So, you know, we may be here soon, but China is ahead of us in this regard. As you know, Elon Musk has come out openly as a Nazi. He's been supporting the Nazi Party in Germany and the equivalent one in Europe and very strongly pushing those ideals here, including the Nazi salute. And after he made this salute, the Anti-Defamation League, which is the main organization trying to complain about anti-Semitism, first said, well, it doesn't really matter, he didn't really mean it, it wasn't really a Nazi salute or something, probably because he's had some support for Israel. But after that, he went on X and made a whole bunch of jokes about all the Nazi war criminals, and that finally caused the Anti-Defamation League to finally admit that the guy is just an anti-Semite, and they're just outrageous, which, is very common on the right. This has all happened before, and the guy before Musk was Henry Ford, who made the first affordable car and was just like him, a genius for making cars everybody loved, but he was also an open Nazi, like Lindbergh, and Lindbergh ran for president, and Ford supported him, and he could have won. And if he'd won, we would have been on the other side in World War II, and if we stay with the current fascist regime in America, we may well be on the Nazi side in the coming war, which, there seems to be a war spreading across the world, and I've heard experts say that George Will published a month or two ago that, in his opinion, we're already in the early stages of World War III. If these wars around the world, just spread and get worse, which seems likely. So Wall Street has entered a new age where the stock trading is hidden. Until now, most stocks were traded on the open market, on the New York Stock Exchange, where everybody can see transactions and everybody competes to set the best price. But I didn't know this. More and more trading is done on private, closed networks. People are trading stocks directly, secretly, and that's now more than half the stock trades. So that is interesting. It means you can't see what the stock prices are, and it also means that the stock prices are not set by an open competition. So that's an interesting issue I hadn't heard of. I know now most political contributions are secret, which is also contrary to the open government laws we used to have, and that was because of the Supreme Court's decision a few years ago to allow these political action committees that can take any amount of money and do not have to disclose where it came from. But looks like the Wall Street investments are moving the same way. So remember, there was a White House press release about a year ago saying software should be memory safe. If you're taking the exploit development class, we're going through this, we're exploiting memory corruption vulnerabilities, and there's the most common type of software vulnerability. Many exploits are based on it, and it's all caused by the language C and its derivative, C++ and such. And there's been a move over the last several years to seriously move away from C to memory-safe languages like Rust. And the White House came out in favor of this, but with Trump going in, he's taking down essentially anything that the Biden administration left, including this. So, and they're also got rid of Jen Easterly, the head of CISA. So I think the government has been very, very good under Biden in terms of cybersecurity and cybersecurity information and helpful information from the government about it. But I think all that is going to go away under Trump because he hates the CISA because they said that foreign actors did not hack the 2020 election. And the election was fair. And that, to Trump, that is an unforgivable sin to suggest that he did not win in 2020. So this is interesting. It's becoming quite clear from the space station that being in space is really very bad for you. It affects your muscles, it affects your bones, and now they realize it affects your eyes. The lack of gravity causes the pressure and fluids in your eye to flow differently, and it changes your eyes. Apparently they did recover when they came back down for missions of 6 or 12 months, but again, this makes it seems very unlikely that we can populate space. And one big example here is Elon Musk. Elon Musk really talks about taking people to Mars. And as far as we can tell, this is absolutely insane. They would arrive there having already taken a lethal dose of radiation. They would live there in an environment which doesn't really support human life, and they would suffer from many medical problems, and they would just die as far as we can tell. Anyway, and it seems like even space missions on the space station or on the moon longer than 12 months are probably going to have irreversible medical consequences. So, it's nice down here. I think with the current technology, there's no way to make space travel and living in space safe enough to put up with for a long time. And so the U.S. is now freezing almost all foreign aid. Like I say, the Project 2025 that Trump is initiating is basically to remake the entire U.S. government and try to make it in some sort of cartoonish imitation of the way it was in 1940. And so they're freezing all foreign assistance except assistance to Israel and Egypt, which are the favorites of the far right. All other nations, they say we shouldn't be helping them. And like I say, we do seem to be heading towards a world war. And one question is, what side will we be on? And I think if Trump had his druthers, we would be on Russia's side. And if the Democrats had their druthers, we would be on the European side. But it's not clear which way we're going to go. And he is also, of course, this is something every Republican does. When they get in, they institute the global gag rule on abortion aid. So you can't even tell people about abortion as an option around the world, anybody that gets American U.S. funding. So this goes back and forth. The Republicans try to outlaw abortion, then Democrats try to legalize it, and it rocks back and forth. It was settled for almost 50 years by the Supreme Court, but the new Supreme Court reversed that because the justices perjured themselves in their hearings and promised not to overturn Roe, and then as soon as they got in, they did overturn Roe. So it's a swindle. And now that we have 6 far-right justices on the Supreme Court, and perhaps even more in new Trump term, it'll be long after I'm dead before we get liberal policies out of the Supreme Court. It'll be the next couple of generations. We'll have these young justices pushing presumably far-right agendas, although the Catholic member, Amy Coney Barrett, seems to be somewhat rebellious and somewhat willing to protect some of the rights in the Constitution and not go in lockstep with the MAGA members of the court. So that's what Trump found, to his dismay, is once you appoint judges, they don't necessarily stay with your agenda. And she seems to have a mind of her own. So there may be some left policies that do get through. Anyway, that's it for the news. Let me stop.